Hello and welcome to the Actual Magician's Bookshelf with me, Marcus Katz, the Actual Magician. Yes, I am an actual magician. Hello to Bill and Birds and Tracy and Hex and Tony and Tracy. Hello everyone joining us for the live. These are entirely unscripted, unprepared, ad hoc sessions where we just hang out on a Friday evening. It's Friday the 17th of October, so we are approaching Samhain, Halloween as it's more commonly known, and we will have some things going on for Samhain, no doubt, and hello to Apox. So I didn't really have a plan for today. I don't know what Tony is saying. He's being very disparaging about my tarot reading desk here. I'm very proud of my tarot reading desk. It's actually got a drawer in it as well. You can't see that on camera, but it's got a drawer with all sorts of rubbish in it. But I was playing around with the Tildwick Tarot by the late Neil Lovell, who I had the pleasure of talking to when he first brought out this deck, and it was in the very early days of the more recent tarot revival, and he wasn't quite sure whether he had any right to produce a tarot deck as just being a graphic designer, just being an artist, and I was really taken by his deck and tried to be as encouraging as I could be at the time, and he produced the Tildwick Tarot and several other decks. The Lenormand deck, one of the Lenormand decks he produced, is very excellent as well, but the Tildwick Tarot is, I think it's definitely one of my top 10 decks. So, Halloween. So Tony's birthday is Halloween 56, a mere snippet of a lad. So I was thinking we could do something with the Tildwick Tarot today, maybe this evening, unless anyone has a reading request, in which case I'm quite happy to do a reading with the usual proviso that we talk about it and discuss it, and we use it as a good way of, hello Sherry, hello and welcome, stay safe driving. So if we want to do a reading, I'm happy with that. Otherwise we can perhaps, I was vaguely thinking just now that as the Tildwick is quite an immersive deck, I could perhaps talk about that a little bit and introduce us to other ways of using the tarot, for example, path working, creative visualization, and how we go about doing that, and even do an immersive session, but not for Sherry. Not for Sherry. That wouldn't be recommended for anyone driving at all. I'm not going to do an online meditation for people driving. And hello Marie, hello and welcome. So we could do something like that. I could certainly talk about how we go about doing that and give an example of how we use those cards. So Birds is asking about, do I do anything with birth cards? I sometimes do, not often, to be honest. I prefer to use tarosophy methods that work with the person in real time in terms of their metaphors, their analogies, their non-verbal communications, and use the cards to communicate with them as I find them. But birth cards are quite interesting when we use them in numerology, when we use them in cartomancy. I have a couple of great techniques that I've lifted from vintage cartomancy books that are really good for using someone's birth date, and you shuffle the deck according to their date of birth and things like that. So Hex had a question, and Sunshine89. Let's deal with Hex's question first, and then Sunshine, if you can hang around for 5-10 minutes, I'd be delighted to do you a simple 3-card reading, particularly if you've got a specific question. That'd be useful. And then we can move on to path working, inner guide meditation, visualization, projection into a sphere, and things like that with the Tilwick Tarot. And I can talk about why I love the Tilwick Tarot and how to use them and so forth. That sounds like a plan. It's amazing if in 5 minutes we manage to generate an entire syllabus and plan for our session. So that's cool. So, Hex, let's do yours first. You move to a new area of the country, and your challenge is that you want to meet people who have common interests. And so the cards need to be able to answer that. Now, this is a little bit more tricky to do in real time by text, by text chat. But can I ask you to explain how it feels, whether there feels like, this is for Hex, whether there feels like there's a challenge, or that you can't see whether it's where the opportunities might be, or you've just really not thought about it enough yet and are hesitant to do so, and what sort of level of common interest are you looking for? Is it that people need to be specifically on your wavelength, or you'd accept a coven of witches as long as they were interested in the same crafts that you are, or whatever it might be? How does it feel? Oh, thank you very much, Luke. Thank you. How does it actually feel to you to be in the situation that you're in when considering that as a challenge? Does it feel very connected to moving, or does it feel as if it's that you often have had challenges meeting people with common interests and the move is sort of secondary to that? Or are they really tightly packed together that it's really not your confidence in some way? So basically I'm just opening up that question to get your feeling on it a little bit before we look at the cards themselves. And I'd often do this with a client. So, excellent. Right. Okay. So, I'm going to thank you for the extra information, and thank you for sharing that with us as well. That's really appreciated. So you retired from the army, moved to a warm place. That sounds nice. Now I'm perusing hobbies and spirituality. Excellent. There are not many people here who like things I do from your perspective. So is the advice that you want from the cards about how you go about finding those people, or how you interact, or the level at which you open up to those people once you do that? So introverted, INFJ, Cancer and Aquarius describe your personality pretty well. Okay then. Right, brilliant. So, let's have a think about that then. So what I want to do is use the question as a metaphor. So let's take it like this then. So are people familiar with what Hex means by INFJ? Basically, that's the Myers-Briggs, and it's a sort of personality matrix that quite often INFJ people will know that they are INFJ people because they are exactly the sort of people who will have looked up their own personality types and found it in the Myers-Briggs system. So INFJ is like the sort of advocate, isn't it? So let's have a think. So that's introverted, intuitive, feeling and judging. So what we're going to do then is use that as our spread, okay? I want to use how you describe yourself so that as an advocate personality or idealist personality, you can use the deck to actually guide each of those components of your personality, because I want to make sure that the cards are speaking directly to you. And that was the purpose of really asking all of those questions. Sometimes people will come up with a metaphor. They'll say it's like banging my head against a brick wall, in which case we can do the spread to look at how you work with a brick wall that's in front of you. And it's easier to do in conversation. Sometimes you can do it from your client's body language. Sometimes they'll move their hand in a particular way while describing their situation, and that gives us a way of doing a spread that speaks to their actual unconscious model. So INFJ or Cancer and Aquarius, we could do it with that because obviously we could do a spread. For example, this was what we were talking about last week. So, for example, if someone, for example, had Sun in Cancer and Moon in Aquarius, for example, we could actually then do a spread whilst we could have maybe 4 cards. No, I don't like that. We would have 1 card in the centre and then another card that would act behind it, and then 2 cards. Let me get a pen that works. Two cards sideways interlocking with each other. For Cancer, 2 cards, 3 cards for the 3 phases of the moon, and 2 cards for Aquarius. So I'd put a card down and then lay another card on top to get to the centre of the problem. I'd then lay out 2 cards to look at how you go about resolving or expressing that problem for Cancer. And I'd look at whatever symbol was on that card here and whatever symbol was on that card and match it to the symbol there so that we respond to the symbol and the nature of Cancer. I'd look at then 3 cards for how you go about relating to people, and that would be for the full moon, the waning moon and the waxing moon. And then I'd do 2 cards that would show how you best communicate with people for Aquarius, if that makes sense. And so we would actually, and this is a bit like, I guess, in answer to that question about birth cards, it's far better to do something in real time with what the person is giving you than if someone's birth year happens to be a Hierophant, year or something like that. That's sort of generally useful, but not specifically useful to the person. Also, when you do this sort of method, which is a pure terosophy method, where we elicit a metaphor from the person, and then like banging my head against a brick wall or being stuck in a swamp or whatever it might be, then utilize that for our actual spread. When they see you doing that, when they feel you doing that, it helps gain immediate rapport and a far deeper level of the person being heard and you listening to that person than anything else. Just producing a sort of standard spread or something like that isn't going to go as deep, as fast as using an actual metaphor that they provided. So in this case, we are going to use Myers-Briggs as a metaphor. Okay, so just very quickly. Now, obviously, usually we do this in real time and it's only take 10 seconds. But in explaining it, we're sort of expanding a bit. So let's have a think. So introversion. Intuition. What have we got? If I remember, feeling. And J is easy to remember. That's judgment. Okay, so this first card is going to be about working with introversion and how to locate an approach. The intuitive one is how to locate. Is how to relate. The feeling is how to develop those relationships. And the judgment is sort of like the aim brackets outcome. Make sense? An old tree with no roots. Old tree with no roots. Okay. So this is about perhaps the purpose of an old tree with no roots. So we'll ask that question, what is the purpose of an old tree with no roots? Okay. What is the purpose of an old tree with no roots? And we'll keep it symbolic. I'm just going to shuffle the we were talking about Texas. We ran our first US TarotCon in Dallas. And we ran 2 there, I think 2 or 3 from memory. And the contact at the hotel chain, it was a very big hotel chain, was staunchly Christian. and we sat and talked to her about tarot quite a bit. That was quite interesting. But yes, it was definitely that area. Okay, so here we go. So the purpose of an old tree with no roots. In terms of locating and approaching, isn't it interesting? We were just talking about the Christian nature of the area, but I'm also reminded about the devil being in the detail as well, a more literal reading of the devil. So perhaps in terms of your introversion, then there is a reason for that, is by exposing the perception of what you're interested in as being somewhat negative. And basically that introversion is engaging with this card, the devil, in your real life, which is literally the way we might think about this card as tarot card readers, and the way we always have to find ourselves bloody explaining it to everyone that tarot isn't satanic, that, oh yes, it has the devil card on it, but that's actually used as a symbol of materialism and attachment and the shadow and ignorance and things like that, in the same way that the death card is about transformation. So perhaps your introversion in that sense is rooted in something that is a perception thing. And I would say to you that as a result, your approach to people should be to face the devil head on. That it may be one of those weird situations where, as Jung talks about synchronicity, and as we all know, those of us who have had long involvement with therapeutic work, self-change work, counselling work and so forth, the moment you start working with your attitude about something internally, suddenly the universe provides a load of challenges, examples, lessons, opportunities, moments to practice, all sorts of things that follow that internal work, even though there appears to be no causality between them. And that is part of what Jung called synchronicity. It's not the whole of it, but that's certainly a part of it. So I'd ask you, Hex, to spend some time thinking about how you are hesitant and whether that hesitancy is entirely justified. Perhaps there's a different way of looking at that, approaching it, feeling more normalized with it. One of the things that happened when we had the TarotCon in Dallas is a couple of people turned up from another part of Dallas. I think they were living at the time, and their lifestyle was seen as something less mainstream and unacceptable to some people. And they found it very useful actually telling people out loud that they were going to a convention on tarot, because a load of people had said to them, oh my God, what, there are conventions for it? So it's like a thing then, and like a professional thing. And they were like, yes, it's at a hotel, it's a 2-day conference, there's speakers from all over the world, and oh, it's a big thing, is it? Yeah, people talk about the artwork and the history, and they got into new conversations with people about tarot. But they found it an attitudinal thing, that they were so het up and hung up, and for good reason. I'm not saying it's not justified, but by changing their attitude, they found new conversations opening and so forth. So perhaps start within. And that might seem counterintuitive as to approaching other people, but yes, start from within. Just to answer Marie, we've got no plans for a TarotCon in the US at the moment, but that may change. Obviously, things have changed a lot in America since we ran TarotCons there. We were delighted to meet everyone and things like that. We paid our speakers, unlike other tarot events, and we had overseas speakers that we felt were worth shipping, flying around the world, that we met in our time and so forth. Similarly, in England, I do want to run one in England. I'm going to the Philippines in November for their third TarotCon, which is massive, and the speakers there are incredible. Their tarot is way advanced and groundbreaking, a lot of it, and they really do know what they're doing there. The events are very professional. And then I'm going via Tokyo on the way back to meet Moto again at the Tokyo Tarot Museum, and we and the Philippines have been talking over the last couple of years about running a big Asia Pacific event, so hopefully there will be something that will come out of that. But I really miss our Lake District TarotCons. We had Rachel here and Mary, Kate Greer, Lon Milo Duquette, Barbara Moore, the folk from Los Scarabeo and so forth. There are... oh yes, and I'm going to pick up my handmade tarot deck from when I was 13, which is still in Manila. So, excellent. Right, so anyhow, just back to that then. So that's an attitudinal thing, and we will get round to your question, Sunshine, just in a moment. I'm just going to go through these other 3 cards for Hex. So, in terms of relating to people, it's on a very material level. So, this intuitive side has to be a bit more practical. So I think you need to look at some very, and again, going with the very earthy Capricorn nature of the devil, and the fact that this is Malkuth in a seer, the very base, bottom, most material thing. It's like literally booking things, going to places, going to any actual physical bookshops or other groups that might have people involved in sort of under the general arch of things, anything established, long structured and so forth. It may even be that you need to provide that arch for people, i.e. start your own group, something like that. And that would be a very practical thing to do. Both of those cards are really practical and earthy. So the feeling you need to develop is the Queen of Wands, which is your own personal authority and following your own values. The Queen of Wands is definitely someone who is expressing and standing strong with their own values. So... and it's also a sort of leadership role as well. So I'm quite often when people have asked me that exact question before, it's not the first time I've ever had that question as a reader. It's usually go-to things that maybe a local yoga group might have someone who's interested in tarot, or they might ask you at a book group to do a talk on the tarot. and you'll meet 2 people from that, and it will slowly pick up from there. But here, it's bringing your experience, perhaps even your military experience, to organisation, to actually do it yourself, to actually... and again, the black cat is often used as a symbol of evil, but we know from our Terry research that this is Snuffles the cat, Ellen Terry's actual cat, and Ellen Terry lived a very, very unique lifestyle despite what was going on around her. She, luckily enough, had the context of the theatrical tradition around her, so people gave, in the early 1900s, theatrical people a certain leeway, but they did see them as a bit licentious and stuff like that. But this is someone living their own truth, we might say their own authenticity, and standing up for it, taking control of it, taking authority. So this is actually you setting up a group, setting up a physical place for people to meet and so forth. I wasn't expecting it to go that direction, but that is certainly what the cards seem to be suggesting. And the aim or outcome, again, I wasn't... it's not surprising that we get another very practical card, the 4 of Pentacles. And so this is the aim or ambition is to gather unto yourself that which is valuable to you. This is the 4, it's done with love, but in the material world, actually using your resources, using... you can see when we're talking about the tree with no roots, that this is where the tree with no roots has now become an emblem of authority. So, yes, Hex, there we go. Well, this is what the cards are saying. You need to follow that intuition. This is your intuitive card for making this arch. Here's you as the wise elder. Here's your uprooted tree. The old tree with no roots can make a very good staff. And I would also suggest to you, when we come, maybe if we've got time to do our walk through the Tilled week after we've done Sunshine's question, make a staff for yourself. Actually physicalize this card and consider that that is a tree with no roots. An old tree with no roots is the staff of authority. So actually make it real, manifest it, and in the process of making that for yourself, other things may happen, other things may follow, but it's a way of resonating the reading into your real life. And that's where magic actually happens, when we actually connect all of these things together. It's no good saying as above, so below, if you don't live by that and actually put things in motion that then resonate, because as above, so below. There are too many people quoting that as if it means something, but it actually only means something when you live it. So, okay, does that help with that question, Hex? Okay. Right, so Sunshine, would you like to ask your question? To say the Tarosophy approach is very simple in the sense in that, if you recall from whenever we were discussing incorporate and utilize, it's easy. We just incorporate and utilize. It's extreme listening to some extent. We're listening to the model that someone is using, the unconscious way they express it. The responses to the cards actually tell us about the cards themselves, so we incorporate and utilize that. So, excellent. I should perhaps do this as a living. Right, thank you, Hex, for trusting us with that question and sharing it. That's really appreciated. Thank you. And keep us in touch with how the group goes and so forth. At some point, we're going to bring back the Tarot Houses, which was an initiative we introduced, I think, long before the world was ready for it, of having tarot houses that followed a syllabus, but it was not optional. So it was like organised reading groups, but tarot reading groups. And we produced a load of material. Tali produced a load of tarot broadsheets that could be given out at each tarot house. And we would take membership of the association from members. And so they would get all of the advantages of being an association member. People running the tarot house would be part of a group of certified tarosophy readers and so forth. But we had resisted it for a long time because it smacks too much of all of the sorts of things that a lot of people do with franchising and almost like a pyramid scheme and stuff like that, and that is the last thing we wanted to be associated with. But we ran one in London, and we had loads of people. We had about 40 or 50 people turn up, and but then, unfortunately, we ran into a load of bad actors who turned up and then went away and decided that we weren't going to work on their territory and stuff like that. And so we just didn't like that at all and sort of gave up on it. But at some point we will go back to introduce that idea, because it'd be nice, even if we only ever had 2 tarot houses in the world, it would be something that we would definitely want to do, because it was fun. We enjoyed it, and people got a load out of it. We covered a lot more in that one. I think we ran it for about 3 hours at a cafe in London, and I think people got more out of that than it was really cool. It was really, really fun. So, and the material in the broadsheets is, in my view, it's really cool. Tali did a load of research into the old coffee houses. That was where the idea came from. She'd been reading about coffee houses and their role in society for sharing information and for setting cultural trends and things like that, and thought how wonderful it would be if we could do that for tarot. So that's what the tarot houses were. Okay, so Bill, yes, pathworking, yeah. Okay, I think we've lost the sunshine, so to speak. It is approaching fall now. We'll soon be at Samhain, so there'll be no sunshine then. Right, okay then, so let's talk about pathworking then. Right, so pathworking is conflated as a term with all sorts of other things, isn't it? We talk about pathworking, we talk about rising on the planes, we talk about projection into a sphere, we talk about etheric travel, lucid dreaming, creative visualization, the inner guide meditation, active dreaming, manifestation, all sorts of things that are somewhat to do with making an active, deliberate form of imagination. Oh, thank you, Hex. That's very much appreciated. Thank you. Pathworking is, I always use it as something specific to the tree of life. So we actually work a path. So we actually visualize a path and travel on it. And there is a I did all of the ones by Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki when I was, I think, in my early 20s, and she had written a load of scripted path workings, and they provided the inspiration for a load that I ran in Switzerland, in Geneva, and we ran all of the paths, all of the Sephiroth, all of the major arcana, and a small group, and then eventually one particular couple that I ended up working with more in a focused way. Every single evening we would meet up and we would do a visualization that I'd semi-scripted, semi-written, but could go off script. And basically that is similar to the inner guide meditation. So there's the inner guide meditation and there's that path working. Creative visualization I see as something more psychological, something more archetypal in that sense. It doesn't have to involve tarot imagery. The inner guide meditation has a very specific introductory phase. Path working, I usually do a lot more ritual around, so I will actually cast the circle, purify, consecrate, do a banishing ritual, and then do the path working, because that balances some of the more powerful energies that you get when you're following a structured map. Okay, so the inner guide meditation is relatively powerful, but it always is very personally based, so it resonates in a manner that's fairly safe, in the sense of within your capacity. I was trying to think what the doctor told me quite a while ago about, and I was really distraught about it, because he said you need to stick to your usual range of movement. And I thought, oh, I'm at the age now, and maybe Tony feels like this as well, and some other folk in the group, that all of a sudden our usual range of movement is not the one that we had when we were in our 20s. So the inner guide meditation tends to work with your usual range of movement. Start to do path working in a structured way, going up the tree of life, or doing Enochian work, or that sort of work. It isn't in your usual range of movement. That is working with resonances, powers, energies, whatever you want to call them, entities that are outside of your usual range of movement. And that's partly why we work with them, partly why we do that. But the inner guide meditation is why I teach it so much, why I promote it, why we have the inner guide meditation workbook and so forth. We have several courses on it and things like that, because it's such a bloody useful technique. I inner guided myself to death and back several times over in my late teens, early 20s. We did so much work with that book, and I still find it useful to this day. So let's take a look then at, if we were going to, the Tildwick Tarot is really good for this, because the conceit of the Tildwick Tarot is that Neil Lovell wanted to create a deck that didn't have any figures in it, any characters, any people. So this deck has the entire feeling of travelling through an old house. See the gramophone here in the window. Now, when he had the court cards, like the King of Staves, he realised that was far more difficult to do without having a actual human figure in the card. So to not break his design rule, he usually has them as little reflections. I don't know if we can see that. Like in the mirror on this card for the court cards alone. So here we have a reflection for the Page of Staves. The Emperor is merely a statuette or a bust on a table. Temperance is a painting, but there are no people inhabiting the world of this deck at all. Sir Abby, I'll be able to do you a quick one-card reading in a few moments when we've just talked a little bit about this subject that we're talking about at the moment, which is pathworking and the inner guide meditation, or entering into a card is really the point I'm going to come to in a second. So that is the Tildwick Tarot, and I just love this deck. So it's called the Tildwick Tarot. I think since Neil passed away, unfortunately, and too soon, his brother, I think, is still selling the decks. And it's Neil Lovell, who passed away a few years ago now, unfortunately, and it's the Tildwick Tarot. So probably if you search that, you might be able to find his site. I think his site, it's just come back to me, was something like Malpertius? Was his site Malpertus or Malpertius? So what we can then do is actually do a visualization, and quite often I'll do this, and this is something that Hex you can also try if you like with the cards that we had for you earlier. If, for example, I had the outcome card and the challenge card in a reading, or one outcome card we could do. I'd choose any particular cards that are giving me trouble in a reading. So say, for example, if it was the Two of Cups and the Ten of Cups, and I would visualize them before going to bed if I wanted to do dream work, or just sat down at a table, and I would open my eyes and I would sit, and I've done this several times with the Tildwick Tarot, and I would visualize myself sitting in front of this cabinet with 10 cups in it. And I would visualize then turning around and seeing this garden outside. And I would switch between the two cards in my imagination to really reify it, to affirm it in my imagination. And then what I would do, again, very simple, always use that rule, incorporate and utilize. I would close my eyes, take a nice deep breath in, close my eyes, sit up in this room, feel my feet on the tiled floor, feel the cool air around me, hear the quiet of the room. There's a ticking clock that I can now hear in the room, and there's some activity out in the garden or somewhere else in the house down a long hallway to the left. I open this, it has a key in it, and it's not been open for quite a while, so I open just this door, and it rocks slightly because it's loose on this corner. It's not quite well balanced on the floor, but that's never been a problem in this house. So I open that and I take that, because I now know, having opened this cabinet, that needs to be taken out into the garden. I get the sense it needs polishing, but I'm not quite sure about that. And as I turn round, I see an open veranda, and actually I hadn't realised why the draft was on the back of my neck, but it's because the veranda door was actually wide open to this garden. There's 3 steps that lead down. They're stone, they're quite rough. I'm, strangely enough, in bare feet, and I can feel that the grass is quite stubbly. I thought it was a bit wet, but I think that's just dew. And I walk down here, and just behind that hedge now, I can see just here in this field, there are some children playing, and also one of them I thought had a kite, but it's a ball, and there's what appears to be an elderly butler here, and he is polishing silverware, and it seems to be him that I need to take this object to. And so I take it to him, and then he starts to polish it, and I don't know if I should wait, so I just ask him, and he's very gruff, and he says, what does he say? Just give me a moment. Just got to sink back into that subroutine that's now running somewhere in my head. He says, no bother, I'll put it back when it's ready. Right, cool. So I can just come back and then sit down in the chair, and I leave. I was going to close that, but I'm going to leave it open because I don't think he's going to take too much time. He had some pocket watches that he was polishing and a few bits of silverware that seemed to be those things that you hang up, like decorative horseshoes. I think those were brass. So he's doing both the brass work and the silver work on the table there. So I don't think it's going to be too long, so I can then close that in my memory. And then usually I'd have burnt some incense while I was doing that, or then I go to sleep with that still in my head. And I can assure you that will make changes in the real world for that question by activating those cards through path working, through the inner guide meditation, through creative visualization, and that is the way I would do it, and do it. I do that quite often. That was actually a reading for me. I just realised that while I did that was a reading that I needed to do. I've no idea what polishing the silverware means, but I'm happy to leave it to the universe to resolve that issue for me. Okay then, so I hope that was just a brief introduction in the time that we have for how you can actually work with the cards. And I guess I'm really just encouraging you to go beyond the reading and, in Hexa's case, actually make a physical staff out of a rootless old piece of tree. And in this case, if you have a problem reading a particular combination of cards, go and ask them, enter into them, work with them, find and incorporate and utilize your own response to it. So, Sarabi, yes, let's just do you, I'm going to do you a Thoth one card reading, and I'll do it anyway, whether you're still with us or not. The reason I'm choosing the Thoth is because it's brutally honest, and it's good for a quick answer. Oh, excellent, Hex. Yeah. Right, so here's an example of doing a one-card reading. So this was for someone who was asking a question for getting a project this month. Well, we've not got much of the month left. So let's see what the Thoth is going to tell us. Is the Magician. So the answer is yes. And the Magician is a card of success. In a book, Tarot Flip, if I do a one-card reading, particularly for myself, I just have a look in our tarot flip book and I find the card and it says success. What you say. The magician brings success and resource to your endeavours. And that's the answer to the question. So success. And I do that particularly if I'm unsure. And you'll notice as well, we used the Tildwick Tarot with Neil's permission at the time for our little series for the tarot flip books and so forth. So that is how I do a one-card reading for somebody. I'd often think to use the Thoth deck or the Waite Smith because it reads so easily. I wouldn't necessarily use something more abstract like the Tildwick for that. Whereas the Tildwick is great for visualization purposes because you can put yourself into it as well. So who was after a general reading? Sim the Great, are you still with us? Otherwise, we will have time to do Rose and then we'll be finishing off. I hope we packed quite a lot in today, I think. How's everyone doing with that? I wasn't... that seems to have gone by really quickly. Thank you for asking the questions and getting involved. That's really appreciated because it helps me find things to actually usefully discuss and work with. So have we lost Sim the Great? Otherwise, I can turn to Rose as we have just a few minutes. Rose, did you have a specific question? So the answer to your question, can I ask a question, is yes. Please, just drop me a question and we'll decide which of these decks to use. We might even do a 3-card reading with Lenormand. Oh, incidentally, everyone, I'm sorry, I'm just moving to grab this and then I'll quickly turn to Rose's question. Charlotte Louise, well, actually it is now Charlotte Wilde. Charlotte Wilde and myself have been working on the Magister, and I've just incorporated the last bit of extra writing for it, and I'm hoping that this will be republished very, very soon. Like as soon as I can get a new proofread version of it. I decided in the end not to make too many changes to it, not the bigger changes that I was thinking of making, because we've still got 9 more books to write in this series. But this is my big book on magic, on Western esotericism, not just tarot, but everything to do with occultism, with the history of occultism, with Western esotericism, both from an academic point of view and a practical point of view. It lays out the overall pattern of our Order of Everlasting Day work. So there won't be much difference between, not as much as I was thinking. The main difference, it has a new quite large chapter from Charlotte on her life. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is to introduce Charlotte to a wider audience, and the other is because it demonstrates, and she has given lots of her real experience over the years from the point of view of being a doctor and a mental health worker, counsellor, therapist and supervisor, a very highly trained, very highly experienced worker in the mental health field of the Innisfree system. So, actually we'll have to produce that as a separate pamphlet, because I was going to work this more into a workbook and reorganize it, but it's not necessary, because anyone who wants to use it as a workbook will be probably following our Crucible Club and the Order of Everlasting Day and so forth, and we'll be guided through the work that's in here. So this has the illustrations from the Tarot of Everlasting Day, but this is a lot of the work from this comes from my PhD work that I then abandoned after 4 years. Is in this. I wanted to actually include it in this, so it's both practical and academic as well. And it's the first in a series of 10. And Tracy, I'm definitely going to get back to you. Charlotte keeps mentioning it to me that I need to do that. I keep telling her that I'm under the weather, but no one cares about that, so I'll just have to get round to answering everyone's emails as soon as I humanly can. I do apologise for that. I've been in a bit of a funk for the last few weeks. I think it's just burnout because of all of the social media stuff we've been doing, but I'm back on the case now, and I think I was ill with that the viral things that have been going around. So, right, so Rose was asking, are you still with us, Rose? I'm just going to do a 3-card reading with, for Rose. And this is not to answer the question that you've asked, in the sense of, will you specifically meet your future spouse by January? Oh, that's fallen. There's the world. Okay. So that's what we call, some people call a jumper card. So I'm going to let another one, oh, okay, it's those two. There we go. The deck is, okay, to answer the question, what you need to do is, it's far more important, this is the card that was at the bottom of the deck, it is far more important that you choose and make up your mind as to what sort of partner is required for you. What is your ideal partner? Literally write a list. I know it sounds a bit lame, a little bit cliched, but Rose, you need to write a list, the pen is mightier than the sword and so forth, of your ideal partner, okay? And it needs to have at least 3 things on it that you write down, because at present, even if you have the expectation that the universe owes you a partner, particularly an ideal one, you may find someone who is quite younger, very active, very outgoing and so forth, but it is going to not lead to anything other than heartache and separation, just to read those cards very literally for you. So, yes, you may meet somebody, but it is not going to be the right sort of person for you. The way to mitigate against that, to avoid that, or even to work with it and to know that that person is not the right person for you, is that you are the Queen of Swords, that you have to be utterly ruthless with your expectations. You will accept nothing other than what is on your list. Make sense? And that's how we do a very quick 3-card reading with the cards. We're forced with a quick reading, with a simple reading, to be more literal with the cards, and I always find that's easier to do and really have the trust of the reading, trust of the cards, that they are going to say what the answer is, and I mustn't step in too much. So it's not that I'm not expressing interest, sympathy, concern, or anything else, Rose. It's just the nature of doing readings like this. We have to be a little bit more literal, a little bit more quick, so that we can actually get you the reading and have time to talk about how we're actually reading it, which is by doing it more literally. So yes, the world is all about completion as well, and this is about having a full picture of what it is that you want, and you have to state it as well. The Queen of Swords is based on a character called Hjordis, which is in a Henry Ibsen play called The Vikings, and Ellen Terry played that character, and Pamela Coleman-Smith drew her as Hjordis, and it's exactly the same figure. That is Hjordis in that play. And she was really good at manipulating people by overhearing conversations and making sure when she said things, other people heard what she was saying, as if they thought she didn't know that she knew that they heard what she was saying and stuff. So even though she felt quite powerless in the men and the groups of people she was in, she was very good at clearly stating things, knowing when to say things, when not to say things, and always being clear and authentic in what she said, so she couldn't be questioned or tripped up. She always ended up in the play in a situation of saying something that no one could deny and brought peace to the land, or brought an amnesty between two groups of people, or whatever. She was in charge, but behind the scenes, but did it by talking. So really, make sure that you speak your truth. Speak your truth. Okay then, so thank you everyone, and everyone take care of yourselves. The world has definitely gone a bit more mad, but that is when tarot actually helps us make pictures in our brains that make a lot more sense than some of the nonsense that we're seeing in the wider world, wherever you are in the world. I'm sure it's we're going through a bit of a melting pot at the moment, a bit of a interesting tidal shift as one tide pulls out and another tide is coming in, and there's a lot of interference and ripples going on in that. And as ever, Bill is putting it far more succinctly with chaos is the midpoint of healing. Let's leave on that, Bill. Let's leave on some Bill wisdom there. Thank you very much. So yes, remember everyone, chaos is the midpoint of healing. I look forward to seeing you next week. And thanks a lot, Tony, for moderating. Thanks a lot for people who have asked questions. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone. And if you're in the certificate course, again, be doing that tomorrow evening. We'll be on lesson 6. Sunday evening. Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.